So the game's just starting. Alright, so this is the first time that I'm watching a Chinese team, by the way, so I really don't know what to expect. Although I guess it's sort of like a hybrid, because there's two Korean... I mean, it's from the Chinese reason, but you know what I mean. Let me lower the volume a little bit. Okay. Let me close the window, because I don't know if you guys can hear outside. Okay. Okay. The game timer right now, for those that are watching in Discord, is 1:40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. My video is stuttering a little bit. I'm going to hide chat. See if that does anything. I have it on source quality. I don't know if I have anything anywhere else. Okay. Okay. So, the question becomes basically, does Origen shred the tower faster than RNG does? I want to call them Renegades just because of the abbreviation, but I guess not. Now, this is also a little bit interesting because I think generally an accelerated mid game would benefit RNG more, but I feel like Origen were the ones to initiate what was going on, so it's a little bit questionable why this would be occurring. And then they're gonna end up giving the kill to Soaz, and I don't like giving the kill to Soaz when you're going for an acceleration. I think there's a lot more greed that could be attained. I do like the call coming out of Kog'Maw. I think that's really intelligent. But I think if the plan was to go for a build like this, or a build order, geez, I'm thinking about like StarCraft. I think if the goal was to go for an opening like this, then you should have just had call from the get-go. Unless you're wondering, well, what happens if we get matched? Well, I think even if you get matched, the disadvantage isn't that big, especially because you're going up against an Ezreal. So I think the argument for call first over Doran's Blade is still going to be completely fine. It's not too big of a difference, but some people in Discord are saying that you can't hear me. Is that true? Or are they trolling? Okay. Alright, people are trolling. So the accelerated mid game doesn't really make too much sense. And now they're doing the lane swap. And the lane swaps are always interesting, because I think depending on who your jungler is, sometimes benefiting when you have a reverse lane swap, like bot lane ends up going top following the swap, as opposed to bot going back down to bottom. I think depending on who your jungler is and who your mid laner is, it can make a lot of interesting timings with Rift Herald, although I think that at this current point in time, it's still a very misunderstood thing in terms of how to make use of it. That's really interesting. Power of Evil would have almost obtained a solo kill, if Corki didn't have flash there. Although I don't understand why he chose to flash when he had cleanse. I think he could have cleansed the root. I don't think he would have died. It's a little bit strange, but it doesn't really matter. And now they're rotating 4 people top lane. This is okay, I think, because of what they just did to Corki. Had Corki not been all right, well, this is really bizarre. I don't understand why you recall Ezreal here. I think keeping Ezreal in bottom would be the ideal play, because you know that he's basically going to be completely free and he's going to be relatively safe. You don't really need to give any gold to Trundle right now because he's basically just going to be utility for the next 10 minutes anyway, relative to the gold that he has right now and how the early game played out. So I think it's a pretty big mistake to keep Trundle in bot right here. I think he could have been recalled, and then you could have had him basically synergize with Braum in top lane, and then you just have Braum roam to help Corki, and then have Braum re-roam to assist Ezreal. So macro-wise, I think the decision making on an economic level is already poor, just from a factual standpoint in terms of math and map movements. So doesn't make much sense. And so now Trundle, I mean, he got a little bit more gold. What did he end up picking up? 5 more CS. So he basically got stunted. He was forced to recall sooner. And now his recall is compromised. And I don't like the fact that he's going straight into, it looks like he's going straight into Phage, which means he's going to go Black Cleaver. Unless I'm blanking on something. Oh, I guess that can go into the new item, Sterex. Yeah, I guess he can just build it into that, but that wouldn't make any sense. I'm sorry, I just saw the Ruby Crystal and Longsword, and I instantly think Phage. Forgive me. I forgot that is the build path for Sterex. Yeah. Not just Sterex Gauge, but the Sterex item. I don't know the name of the small little red item. I actually don't know the name of that. I want to say it's like a bracer, but Jerome's Fist. Oh god. Okay, I was really far off. So now they have the Rift Herald, and they end up rotating it down into bot lane. And this is the problem with what RNG is doing. Is their rotations and their map movements are really suboptimal. And it's a little bit bizarre. It feels like they're not really playing their comp the way that it could be played, especially because they have 3 scaling lanes, which doesn't make any sense why they would go for any sort of such a enhanced acceleration into mid. Like, it's fine to go, tit for tat in the early game in terms of the acceleration, but when you keep forcing it and you end up blowing open this game at 8 minutes, and you have the side lanes completely open, and now they're extremely long lanes. It's really bizarre. I guess it makes your Ezreal a little bit safer, but I don't think that was intentional, as we saw, because I think Origen just outplayed them in map movements. So I feel like China's getting really, really outplayed right now. They're down 2,000 gold. They're also down a Herald. So that's gold that obviously can't be recovered once it gets to a certain point in the game. And the reason that I mentioned that is because it makes me think back to Diamond Prox, something he said about dragons back in the day, versus towers, like trading dragons for towers. Not that it was always the correct choice, but it's just important to mention that they have a gold thing that they should be able to capture again, and then that's sort of giving like an assist to every player on the team, so that's pretty big. I end up killing Soaz there, but the problem is that off the kill on Soaz, nothing is really obtained, so then you have to ask yourself, is the ROI really worth it? I don't think that it is. Okay. Now Corki, not really doing anything. The game basically drawing very stale. And this is where it doesn't benefit Origen, is when the game does draw to become very stale. Although it should have worked against RNG, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be working against them too much. So now when you have something like this is basically a dream scenario for RNG. It shouldn't have been. There was definitely things that Origen could have done to manipulate how the map could have been played out for both teams, but it looks like they didn't end up taking it, so it's not going to matter. And now what's going to end up happening is Ezreal and Corki and Trundle are all basically going to get free ramps. So you can say that this was a gambit by RNG, but honestly, I don't think it was intentional, because of the things that we did mention that Origen could have done to make it so that the map being the way that it was approximately 3 minutes ago, or like 2.5 minutes ago, could have been very bad. But because, you know, it's sort of like they're getting away with like a hidden expo in StarCraft, and so it's paying off even though it shouldn't have. You know, just assuming that, you know, Origen could have done something different or told, you know, known that something was up, and so it sucks right now. That was a little bit weird. This is pretty like there's honestly not too much to say other than deeper macro things, but it's very, very repetitive because of how fast the game got busted open. So basically Origen just wants to do the same thing for 5-6 minutes, you know, over and over and over. Now, they do need the Herald, okay? So a lot of their options become available via Herald. And when Corki moves out of the mid lane like this, it doesn't make too much sense, because I think, especially relative to the Herald timer, you give up the only lane that you had a full lock on. Now, I think if RNG rotates down and they kill Soaz right here, I don't really think that it gains anything. I think the only thing this gains is a bunch of angry Reddit people being idiots, being like, oh, Soaz died again. But in reality, I think it's fine for him to die there, because it's really bad for RNG to actually commit to killing him there. It's actually just a macro blunder, because the kill doesn't grant anything. You can argue, well, they got a tower off the kill. No, they didn't get a tower off the kill. The tower was going to be theirs anyway, regardless of if Soaz was alive or not. So it's just a bad play. Now, Origen not picking up that tower and not picking up top, which should have been the reward from RNG's bad macro decision to rotate down and kill Soaz, just doesn't do anything. And now that you can see that RNG is basically behind in summoners, and the next team fight, which is about to bust out inside of Dragon, is going to be really bad for RNG, because now if they lose this Dragon fight, assuming that they lose the Dragon fight, they're also in a situation where they can get baited into the Dragon pit, and if they get baited into the Dragon pit, they can be suffocated and executed out of the mid lane, and basically they can be forced into a very specific threshold where normally they would benefit from, but in this instance they're not going to benefit from it because it's too early inside of the game. Ezreal doesn't have, even though he has Iceborne Gauntlet, which is really nice, he doesn't have the Monomune to really add, you know, power to his punch. So he's basically just utility at this point, and when he's just utility and he's not threatening enough damage, nothing's really going to come from it. So as long as Origen can basically suffocate the edges and they can just control Dragon, what they could do is they could do a gambit. Not the team, but they can give up Dragon and they can basically force control over RNG's blue side jungle, and they can suffocate them out through the mid turret, like the space in between the mid turret. I wish there was a name for these things. And then even basically lock them out of wolves into the entrance to the mid tier 2 turret. And I think if you can do that, then you open up the ability to also lock top lane and bot lane and have it become a dark lane, and then force RNG to just keep running up mid. But instead what we see is we see Origen with a beautiful top lane, which is in their favor, and a really bad bot lane, but it's irrelevant relative to the fact that Dragon was coming up, and then, you know, they just group in mid for absolutely no reason, and they end up dying. Origen was just really, really, really far ahead. Okay. Now, the other thing is that Kog'Maw is going to wake up sooner than Ezreal and Corki. And when you've accelerated the game as fast as you did, which I said that RNG would have benefited a little bit at one point from how the game actually accelerated. But then they dropped the ball again, even though the ball was back in their court. They dropped it again. And now what's going to end up happening is Kog'Maw wakes up sooner. And when Kog'Maw wakes up, it becomes really weird. But it also depends on how Origen is going to choose to move around the map, because it could just end up being really bad. My game timer is currently at 16:27 for the people in Discord. Now grouping in mid I think is really bad. Basically what Origen needs to do right now is they need to wait for RNG to mess up and send the top wave back into them. When RNG sends the top wave back into them and there's no Herald or there's no Baron to be gained, but there's also no Dragon to be gained on the east side of the map, it's inherently just bad for RNG to be on the east-hand side of the map at that point. So what Origen needs to do is they need to just do 0-1-4s until top lane is basically at their top tier 2 tower, and they need to lock it, and they need to use that as a resource for like LeBlanc or Elise. They don't need to give any of it to Nautilus. Nautilus is basically irrelevant right now in terms of a place that you need to allocate gold into. So if you go for a 0-1-4 and you basically force all attention over to the right hand side, if you can somehow get RNG to group up at their tier 3 turret, and then you can cut them off inside of their wolves and inside of their blue side jungle and make a collapse onto their mid tier 1 turret, you can indirectly flank whoever is left in mid, and you can force him off the mid tier 1 turret, and then you can use that to get an objective. And then as you do that, you can basically at the same time defend your mid tier 1 turret and then reclaim your own jungle's camps and creeps. But instead, we're gonna group up in mid and you know, not play macro games. So that's really good. This is so sad. The caster is saying that Origen doesn't have a reply right now, but honestly, it's just that Origen's not capitalizing macro-wise in terms of things that they could be doing in order to suffocate RNG. And now they're going to end up getting this mid tower. And this is something they could have done had they just orchestrated it in bot lane. They easily could have sacrificed one person to get RNG out of position, which is something that you need to do in professional League of Legends sometimes. You need to sacrifice a player, or you need to sacrifice what looks like, you know, something that's going to be beneficial for the enemy team, but in fact it's not. Because had they done that, and then had they claimed mid tower, they also would have gotten the 3rd Herald, right? And the 3rd Herald, that's now 160 gold basically for every member on the team. You basically just gave everyone an assist. That is absolutely gigantic. Like, see Soaz being in top lane right now with Sunfire just doesn't make any sense. It really just doesn't. Because you have to think about, what does his next item completion really do for the team fight? It doesn't do anything relative to the next team fight that's going to come up. He's basically going to be the same in terms of his effectiveness and in terms of his priority for RNG during the next team fight. So when you think about something like that, it actually becomes correct to allocate the gold either into your mid laner, your jungler, or your AD carry. But I guess in this instance, Kog'Maw can't really go into that lane without doing basically the same thing as Nautilus, except worse because of the speed at which you would do it. So it's sort of an awkward predicament for Origen. Right now, the problem also is that the tier 2 tower does a lot for RNG because of their composition. And because one of their win conditions is basically on the backs of Baron, and obviously when one of your win conditions, and one of your major win conditions is off the backs of Baron, the second dragon means a lot to you. They don't really have a win condition via the split push, even though Trundle normally, in some cases, would be able to do that. And that's primarily just because the only lane they could make use of is not opened up wide enough for them. So Trundle would not be able to actually make it through Nautilus, I don't think, in time. And you only have one teleport anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. The one thing that I don't like is normally the Abyssal Scepter would be fine also on LeBlanc. This is just a nitpick, but I think you know that the enemy team is going to get a lot of MR, mostly because your entire team deals magic damage. So if you're, even though the Abyssal Scepter will help, I definitely think that you need to fit in a Void Staff in there as well. Anyways, the next dragon's coming up. Now, it would be really interesting to see if Origen can try to do some sort of a cheese play. I don't know if they could actually cheese Baron Vision, nor do I think that would actually work. It's just, you have to really wonder, because they actually can't take a straight-up engagement, or can they take a fight? And if they funnel into Dragon Pit, even if they have control over the Strait, which is the entrance leading into River from RNG's side, I think it doesn't actually do enough because of RNG's comp. So they have to make some sort of a play around top lane and around the left-hand side of the map, or they need to go for a bait in the sense that they let RNG into Dragon and then they just funnel up mid and try to get the mid-tier 2 tower and then control over RNG's red side, inherently just protecting Baron Vision and Baron control, and then basically making use of bot lane. These type of fights, they don't do anything because they're never gonna win with their composition. It's just it's not what the comp is meant to do. It's not how they're supposed to play the team fights. This has nothing to do with if the comp is bad. That's completely irrelevant. Also, Corki had cleanse. Looper was sleeping in mid lane. I don't know what just happened. Now they should just get Baron. Just get Baron. Just get Baron. What are they doing? Look at this. Look at that. It's solo queue in here. LeBlanc could have lived, by the way. If she just moved a little bit more, she would have stalled a little bit longer. And I think that would have been really good. I have no idea what Origen's doing. Okay? It doesn't make any sense, because sometimes you need to capture objectives that don't necessarily benefit you, because let's be honest, that second dragon doesn't do anything for Origen because they already have all the tier 2 towers down, right? But it does do a lot for RNG, and when you have nothing else really going on side of the map, do you really just want to coin flip a fight? Okay, maybe you do, but would you rather not coin flip the fight inside of or after capturing an objective such as Dragon, which means a lot to the enemy team? Because sometimes it's not about stuff that you want to do, it's about stopping stuff that your opponent wants to do. That, you know, that's how you play the game. Like, is Soaz gonna live? No, he's not gonna live. So this is really unfortunate that, okay, well, oh, that was so close. This Ezreal is going off. It looks like Mata's typing in timers. I just saw that on there. So see, this entire fight's just really bad. This is basically the macro in a nutshell. League players are still really far behind in terms of understanding economics and in terms of understanding map movements. Obviously, in some cases, there's obviously displays of brilliance, and I think Origen in the past historically has been one of the best teams in the world at map movements, especially last year. But sometimes there's just decisions that are really wonky, and you really question why is it happening, and how is it even happening? How are they thinking this is a good decision, or how is this even being entertained as a logical choice? And it really just doesn't make sense. They just gave up, basically, the ability to lock RNG out of top lane. They gave up the ability to simultaneously capture Dragon and control Baron. They gave up the ability to force RNG to funnel into an area, post-objective capture, that if RNG loses the fight, they might also lose the game. You know, like, there's so many variables that you can entertain that just aren't being captured and they're not being made use of. man. You shouldn't drink coffee when doing one of these. I have to go to the bathroom pretty badly. This is just really bizarre. The movements and everything by both teams now. It's interesting. I mean, you can make the argument that obviously they can't see the entire map, and some of their decisions are being made, off of their client, their own vision, right? But honestly, nothing I'm talking about is relative to the ability to see the entire map. It's based off of the team's vision. Like when I make a comment about Origen, or when I make a comment about RNG, I'm looking at their wards, their minions, their champion vision, and then saying what could be said. Very rarely are we going to talk, 3 minutes into the future about it. Even then, that has nothing to do with the team's current vision. I also apologize to people in Discord if people are using like text-to-speech and stuff. I'll create more mods after the game so that it's a cleaner environment. This doesn't make any sense. Basically, RNG doesn't even need to take this fight, but I think they're just taking it at this point because it's extremely difficult to lose. Any sort of a fight that's in a condensed area, or like anything where Origen is forced to funnel in, at this point in the game is going to be really bad. Gragas didn't realize that Thresh is not on his team. It looked like he tried to take the Lantern. That was pretty funny. And now it looks like they're just going to go for a Baron. I think when you can't really stop the Baron here if you're Origen, what you need to do is you need to attack Baron without attacking Baron. So what you need to do as Origen is, rather than try to stop this, you're never stopping it. Just push every minion wave that you can. Basically, you want to delete as many minions on the map as possible so that, Baron isn't able to be put into immediate use. So, like, right there in bot lane, beeline to it. Just beeline straight to bot lane, try to cut off the next wave. Obviously, they're going to have Baron recall, they're going to have home guards, whatever. Try to beat them to any punch that you can and just kill all of the minions, even if you have to use all your mana or you take a little bit of damage in doing so, as long as you don't die. And then with that, then you group up and then you defend, and then you control certain areas of the map. Like, this is just bad. The fact now that RNG is going to capture the dragon doesn't do too much, but it is a little bit more frustrating now for Origen to try to stick or to get on to people. So as with the 5th death, honestly, I feel like a lot of people will blame him, but just to be completely honest, a lot of his deaths were actually really bad decisions by RNG. And I have to say that after the game, because I know that people are going to be like, oh, Soaz 0-5. No, you're an idiot. Because at least 3 of this guy's deaths, at least 3 of Soaz's deaths this game, were actually horrible decisions by RNG to go on to him. That's the god honest truth. Origen's inability to pressure or to capitalize on RNG's mistakes for going for Soaz does not change the fact that the decision in itself is poor. So that doesn't matter. And it looks like RNG is just going to take the game. So that's pretty much it. There was a lot of macro blunders. I do think that Origen dismantled them in the early stage of the game. And I think that they just lost it later on. And I think the superior map movements and control from RNG came out and came to fruition. And that was pretty much it. So, okay, I will stop this VOD.